Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
It's Friday, August 19th, and today we're going to do things a little differently. Katherine White and Fennell Norton can't be with us today, so instead we're bringing together some bold and fearless women who know how to get things done to help us have conversations on empowering and inspiring our inner badass. The crew today is being led by Louisa Boyarsky, leader of the Grassroots Coalition and Georgetown professor, Lindley Thorne, political director of the World Ground Game, Stair Calhoun, co-founder of Network Nova and our ambassador of Buzz, and I'm Robbin Warner, the show wizard. I'm usually behind the camera, but today we are all up front and on the screen. We have three terrific guests today. GINA WARNER, founder of the Badass Women's Book Club, will join us for a conversation on finding our inner badass. Lindley Thorne is going to interview Casey Longenecker, chair of the Appomattox Democratic Committee, and they're going to discuss how Casey is leading the effort to have people work together for the good of community, and they'll be giving us a recap of last week's amazing World Summit. And Louisa Boyarsky will interview CARRIE Short, activist and organizer from Hampton Roads, and then you'll hear all about our third and final Women's Summit. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Louisa to talk about give us our grassroots update, and to tell us more about why all roads are leading to canvassing right now.
Thanks so much, Robbin. It is great to be with everyone in the Zoom room today. As many of you know, we are getting close to the election season. It's only going to be about a month until we can start voting early. And this is the best time to start to be canvassing, right? At some point, we're going to have all those TV ads, and we're going to keep hearing over and over and over again about the elections. That's a challenging time to canvass because that's when people are a little burnt out. People are ready to talk now, though, and we have so many great things to share with them. We just had the Inflation Reduction Act pass, and it was signed into law. It's really exciting to talk about because there are multiple things that are important in that bill. If you're a climate change person, there's climate change. If you are a person who cares about healthcare, there's prescription drug cost reduction, among a lot of other things that we want to talk about with our voters at the doors. So I was in Virginia Beach about a month ago canvassing. I had a fantastic time. So what I want to do is get you guys excited to canvass too. The great thing about many of these canvasses that we're planning, which are going to be these big grassroots days of action, one, they're fun and everyone's going to be there. So you should definitely find a chance to get to one of the ones that are coming up, if not all three. But also they're going to be trainings ahead of time. So if you don't feel like you are prepared to canvass, you want to ask questions, you want to make sure that you're fully informed, there'll be opportunities for that as well. So the first canvas I want to tell you about is our Grassroots Canvas for Democracy that is going to be held for Jennifer Wexton. It is going to be supported by the Loudoun Democrats, the Loudoun Grassroots Coalition, among other Democratic committees in that area. They already have 100 people signed up, but their goal is to knock 40,000 doors that weekend. So we need everybody to commit to coming and picking up a packet and getting engaged. Of course, it can't be a grassroots event if there isn't something fun afterwards. So they're going to have a great lunch or meal. I forget what time it is that will be after you canvass, but it'll be really, really fun. So I'm going to put that information in the chat. Really encourage you to sign up now because it's next weekend on August 27th. So please, if you can, make a plan to come out and support Jennifer Wexton at the Grassroots Canvas for Democracy. Next, we're going to tell you a little bit more about the fun Luria Canvas for Democracy that will be coming up as part of the Women's Summit. Not going to tell you too much now because it's going to be part of our discussion with Stair later, when she's going to highlight all the fun things that are going to be part of the Virginia Beach Women's Summit in September. And then, of course, we can't forget Abigail Spanberger. So we're going to plan a big grassroots canvas for democracy for her on October 15th. So save those dates. I'll remind you one more time. There is August 27th, there's September 17th, and October 15th. So those are some really important events. Now, you may not be a canvasser, but you want to help people get out the vote. We have a great opportunity for you to help with early voting. First off, Stair and Dennis have been working to get us some yard signs that encourage people to vote early. As you know, the reason we vote early, multiple, right? You don't want to stand in lines day of the election. 2, you may go and vote early and realize, oh no, I forgot that I didn't re-register to vote after I moved last year. So there are lots of reasons you want to vote early just to make sure that vote gets in and it counts. So we would love you to, 1, buy a yard sign, put it in your yard, use that QR code where people can use the QR code to find out information about where they can vote early. Also, we're going to be doing a big social media storm. We have a different topic every week for starting at the beginning of September. We would love for you to be part of that social media storm. So there's going to be a form that you can fill out, 1, to buy a yard sign, 2, to join the social media storm. And we will make sure that each week we'll email you, tell you what the topic is, and send you social media graphics that you can use to get people involved that are part of your social media network. Let's see, there are a couple more things that many of you may have heard. We do have a special session coming up on September 7th in Richmond. This was supposed to be a really quiet session where they were just going to vote in a judge. Unfortunately, we are pretty sure that the governor is going to try to push through a 15-week abortion ban. This is something that obviously we don't want, but most of Virginians don't want this either. We want to make sure that we have presence in Richmond on the 7th. And so Stair is going to put in the chat information for how you can join the rally that's going to happen at the Bell Tower in Richmond on the 7th. And if you can't make it in person, there are going to be some online opportunities to get engaged as well. If you weren't going to canvass, but you want to stand up for women's rights, this is the time to do it. Show up in Richmond on the 7th. And I think the last thing, just as a reminder, is Women's Equality Day is coming up on August 26th. And we are also going to be creating some social media graphics for that event as well. So please watch our Twitter feed, the Network Nova Twitter feed, etc. You'll have a chance to retweet those graphics. There are just so many important messages that we want to send about the importance of women's equality. Some of that is to women, just to celebrate the importance of it, but some of it's to men, to get them on board and to remind them how important it is that they are allies in this work for their wives, for their friends, for their mothers, for their daughters, right? So this is going to be a really fun way to get involved and to remind people about women's equality. So I think I covered everything. If I didn't, and there are people in the room, please add stuff into the chat about ways that we can get involved this next week to support democracy.
Well, thank you so much, Louisa. And how can people find out more about the Grassroots Coalition?
Yeah, great question. So the Virginia Grassroots Coalition is a coalition of grassroots groups across the state. And what we try to do is we collaborate both on elections and on legislation. And if you're interested in joining, you can, I will put my email in the chat and you can just email me and say, I'd like to join. You'll get our weekly email that gives you an update on everything that's happening grassroots wise across the state. And then we do have a meeting monthly to really strategize together. We want to make sure that we are not rebuilding the wheel, but we are working together to amplify each other's work and all of our messages together. So really excited for more people to join.
Thank you very much. We'll get back to you soon, Louisa.
Sounds good.
So now I'm very excited to bring up our first guest, GINA WARNER. GINA is somebody we've been wanting to have on the show since we heard about her work forming the Badass Women's Book Club at our good friends, the Barnes Alley Bookstore, way back Barnes Alley has been a big supporter of the Women's Summit since the beginning. So Gina, welcome. And I want to start off by asking you, why did you form this book club? Besides
Well,
the fact that it had a kick-ass name.
right. I mean, when you get a great name, you got to do something with it, right? Well, I thank you. And thanks for the shout out to Barnes Alley and Jen Morrow. What a badass woman. You know, the vision, the courage to start a small business, start an independent bookstore. If you guys haven't been to Barnes Alley, right on Historic Church Street in downtown Vienna, encourage you to go. I guess I'll do some of my commercials later because we will be kicking back up with meetings starting in September. And I want to shout out some of the other local independent bookstores in the area too. But to answer your question, so how did I start the Badass Women's Book Club? So, you know, it started, I was coming back from, I would say it was probably a moment of severe imposter syndrome that was kind of overtaking me. I was coming back from a leadership conference, really one that I was extremely honored to have been selected. It was a really competitive event, and it was over a 6-month period. This was like the culminating weekend, and I'm in the airport in Dallas, and I'm just like really mad at myself because I left this conference and normally I'm a pretty outgoing person, you know, who probably talks, you know, more rather than less or whatever. But there was something about this experience that just really led me to just kind of like be quiet and not participate. And I was just like, and I'm just in the airport in Dallas, I'm like, what have I done? I've wasted this opportunity. I have just not, you know, what's wrong with me? And I happened to be walking by the bookstore in the airport, and I see this book with this bright yellow, I just remember it so well. It was such a bright yellow color. And I'd like to say since then, there have been a lot of books with yellow covers. I think there's something to that. And it just drew my eyes in, and it said, you know, you are a badass. And so I made a beeline to it. And I was like, you know what is this about? I flipped through it. It was this lovely paperback. I'm like, I'm going to get this. I'm going to read it. And because I'm not going to take this from myself, right? This is not who I am, and why did I fall into this pit? And so, for those who haven't read the book, You're a Badass. It's just, I think the author Jen Sincero calls it self-help for people who aren't self-helpy, and it has that approach. It's really a funny kind of story. So I started reading it on the flight. You know, got about 40 or so pages into it, and it didn't turn my life around, but it inspired me enough, you know, for me to say, okay, you know, there's something to this. I myself am going to resolve to do better. And then got me thinking about, you know, I know I'm not the only person, right, who feels this way. What can I do to bring women together? I've always been a reader, love to, you know, from Nancy Drew on, right? I've just loved to read. Have never, you know, really been, someone who thought about like the self-help kind of books, but the more I started looking around, I said, you know, there's some like really good stuff here. And so just came up with the idea. Jen had just opened the bookstore maybe a few months before. This was like June, and maybe she opened it in July. It was around that time. And I went to a colleague at the time who was helping kind of get the bookstore started. And I said, hey, I have this idea for a name of a book club. Let me run it by you. And it might be a little bit too much, you know, the Badass Women's Book Club. Is that okay? And she's like, love it. Let's do it. And yeah, so the rest is history, as they say. We've been there almost 5 years. Yeah.
Well, how does reading about empowerment help people find their inner badass?
Yeah. You know, I think, well, and first let me say, a lot of people ask me, like, what does it mean to be badass? So I think it means different things to different people, right? What it means for me to be a badass is probably what it means different to you or whatever. So, you know, you just had, and you know that, right? You know what it is. Like when I'd say like when you're operating at your highest, or when you're, you know, when you're in the zone, or when you're in the flow, or when you're feeling like you're at your highest level of potential, empowerment, outspokenness, you know, then I think, you know, that's when you're living your best, you know, badass life. And so I think what helps us in the books is often, you know, it's the stories of other people. It is, you know, what they've overcome, that either helps us identify with something in our own lives. And it might not be every chapter of every book, but there's often sometimes that, you know, that one or two nuggets. I think, you know, a lot of the books I try to pick often are very directive in terms of like, here's 3 things you can do or 5 things you can do or something like that. So I just think that, and then I think the added layer, the book club, the community of people helps us, it's sort of like I think of it like an informal coaching circle. Like, hey, what did you get out of this? What did I get out of this? Spoke to me, this spoke to you. So I think all those combine, again, not the silver bullet, but give us the tools and strategies we need, I think, to continue to move ourselves forward to achieving what we all know we're capable of.
What kind of books do you read?
So interestingly, I heard you guys talk about the evolution of this organization, right? I think we've all evolved. I started out with the idea that it was going to be a nonfiction book club, and that was kind of something different. Reese Witherspoon and I had this idea to start a book club at the very same time. Who knew? So her, I would say her book club was, I'm going to pick books for women to read. I'm going to see if they like them. I'm going to turn them into movies. That's worked out very well for her, I will say. Great idea, Reese. But I was sort of sensitive to the idea that I didn't want to be another just fiction book club. And for one thing, Bard's Alley had a contemporary fiction book club, still do. It's amazing. So I thought, okay, we'll be this nonfiction book club. That's all we'll read is nonfiction. So we did about 4 or 5 months of that. And people are like, this is a lot. Like, we can't, this working on myself all the time is exhausting me. And so, I kind of read the room, no pun intended, and started to think about, okay, what are some other types of books, some other genres, pulled in a couple of memoirs, which have proven to be hugely successful when the book club members did intersperse with some fiction, because sometimes, we do need a break. And I will say there's an amazing amount of, fiction books. My motto for the book club is it's by badass women for badass women. So we only do books by women authors, and they have to be written somehow for. So if it's a book by a woman author, but it's got a male protagonist, and so we don't do it, right? So books for badass women by badass women are the books that we read. I'd say we're still, probably 60% nonfiction throughout our year, interspersed, and some of that does include some memoirs, and then putting some fiction in there as well. Oh, I think you're muted, Robbin. I can't.
It's hard when you're in charge of the whole system.
I know, keeping it all straight. Well, while she does that, I can talk a little bit about some other evolutions and some other things that I've learned along the way about the type books.
Absolutely.
Oh, there you go. Okay, and then we'll have to ask people to put in the chat what they think. We've only, in our November will be 5 months we've been meeting. In that time, we've only had 2 books that everyone loved. I think that's the other kind of thing is and I'm not democratic, no offense, I'm not democratic about the book selection. I pick it. So, that's the one kind of thing. It just, I work another full-time job, and I see to make things easier, as easy as I can.
What are
so
some of the favorites?
Okay. So does anyone want to guess, put in the chat what they think of all those books we've read over almost 5 years? There were only 2 that were unanimously liked by everyone in the book club. When we usually do a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle to kick off our book club. So if anyone, just put a few ideas in the chat. So while those are coming in, I'll just talk a little bit about some other things. So soon after I started the in-person book club, I began to get interest from, I posted, so 22 women came to the first meeting at Bard's Alley. If you've been at Bard's Alley, it is not huge. So that was really crowded, but that was great. And this was pre-COVID. So we were we probably could not do that now. We were all on top of each other. But I posted about some of the photos just on my personal Facebook page. And friends of mine from other cities said, oh my gosh, I wish I had something like that here. So I was turning 50 that year. So I started, took my, I got a bonus at work, took my work bonus and built out a website. And made the book club virtual too. So while I still do the in-person meeting at Bard's Alley, and pre-COVID, I did the in-person meeting at Kramer Books, but still do the in-person at Bard's Alley, and then have this very large, community of over 20,000 women on Instagram. And so have a virtual community that goes along, with that as well. So let me see where people were with you. I don't think I saw it come up when I was looking at either one of them come up. Let me just scroll. So the two books that everyone loves. So if you haven't read them, add them to your list. One, no surprise, Becoming by Michelle Obama. Everyone loved that. There were three actually. And the second one was Educated by Tara Westover. That was another one that people really loved. Highly recommend that one too if you haven't read it. And then the third one, I can't believe I forgot, was Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. So even though we read some fiction, so two of those, so actually all three of those, I guess, are memoirs. Like I said, memoirs were surprisingly popular, with our book club community.
And to close it, and to round us out, when we were chatting, you mentioned about the impact that you finding your inner badass has had on your teenage daughter. And say a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I had my daughter starts her senior year of high school on Monday. She's be senior at Madison High School in Vienna. And it's interesting when you all were talking about the grassroots work around the state and everything. I've always been very active in politics. I worked for a female U.S. senator for a number of years. So I've always been active in politics, less so since I moved to Virginia. But honestly, I always felt a little bit superior against, my friends who lived in Louisiana, Alabama, like, oh, your state is such a shit show and we got it together. Well, now it's like, I don't know, guys, it's a little scary. So anyway, have always kind of talked about, politics, and my daughter is involved in her high school and her Girls United Club. So I'd like to think that, she's always felt like, this was women's issues were something she cared about. We talked about, we emphasized she was, and this is, what I said will be her. Where were you when JFK Jr. was shot? For my generation, where were you when the Challenger, exploded? She was at Girls State at Longwood University in a room of 400 other 17-year-old girls when they got word of the Dobbs decision, right? I said, that's going to be your moment. And she goes, that feeling of being in that room, she said, the sadness that because that's their lives, right? And I think that's the thing that girls right now realize. If you'd ever told me, my daughter will have less rights than I did at her age, and I grew up in Alabama, guys. That she would, that's just staggering. And so I think hopefully seeing me have this project that I care about, that is about empowering women, is inspiring her to look around her community and see what she can do, and to understand. And I think also the other thing is the power of women. That's what I really see in this generation. It's that, they understand and they want to be surrounded by other women. They understand the power of that community. So I'm hopeful as they all turn 18 next year. Unfortunately, she won't be able to vote in November, but I think the current leadership who isn't aligned with us and with our girls are going to be in for a surprise, because I do think this generation, they're way more outspoken than I ever was at that age. They're way more involved and informed. Social media has helped them, right, a lot with that. So I'm going to be hopeful that everything that we're doing is going to create a path for them. So.
Well, great. So how can people get involved in the Badass Women's Book Club?
Right. So we'd love to see you at Bard's Alley. Our first meeting of the year, we took some of the summer off, is going to be September 7th. All the information's on the Bard's Alley website there. I mentioned the virtual Badass Women's Book Club. You can follow us on Instagram at Badass Women's Book Club. There is a private Facebook group, Badass Women's Book Club members. And I do put out a weekly newsletter that has book recommendations, show recommendations, podcast recommendations. So I encourage you to sign up for that. And I love doing it. I'm working on tomorrow's newsletter. It comes out every Saturday morning. And in my mind, I hope it's something that enjoy a cup of coffee, think about, oh my God, what are these amazing books that are coming out? What are these shows I want to watch, podcasts I want to listen to?
All right. So. Well, thank you so much, Gina. I really appreciate it.
Robbin.
We're all feeling pretty badass now. And with that, I am going to bring up Lindley Thorne, one of our favorite badasses down there in Harrisonburg, to talk to Casey Longbottom about rural Virginia.
Thank you, Robbin. I'm really, really glad that Casey Longenecker from Appomattox can be here today, mostly so she can share, but also if you don't know Casey, she's kind of amazing. A lot of the work that gets done in rural spaces kind of goes unnoticed and unrecognized. And that's really unfortunate because to be a Democrat or aligned in any way with progressive policies in a rural space is really daunting, really challenging, and it requires a level of scrappiness that is truly next level. And we were at the Rural Summit. Casey was one of the speakers there, and I love that we had an opportunity to offer space and the mic to people like Casey, because I feel very strongly that Casey is exactly the type of person that we should be looking to for guidance and inspiration in the work that she does that is truly meaningful. I've learned a lot from her, and I think you will too. So Casey, to start us off, I would love to hear just quickly your thoughts and impressions of the Rural Women's Summit before we head into some of these more on the ground questions about things you're doing in Appomattox.
Thanks for having me. I think this is pretty awesome. It's nice to be or participate in anything that empowers women and gives a voice to women's issues and provides a platform for women to discuss these things. Right now, I feel like our political spaces are dominated entirely too much by men discussing women's issues, and men don't necessarily have a very good grasp on what women's issues are, let alone where they stem from. So to be able to participate in an organization and group like this is really fun. It's enlightening and empowering.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. So glad you could be here. And again, we had some wonderful speakers, including Casey and several other Rural Democratic Committee chairs who don't often get recognized or even sometimes thanked for the challenging work that they do in difficult spaces. And we also heard from a lot of folks who are engaged in our public schools, especially as we're seeing a lot of truly deeply concerning things happening on our school boards. And those are things that people might not be aware of, but people like Casey are deeply engaged in these spaces and, having to have tough conversations about getting people to those meetings, encouraging them to speak up or simply be present. The overall theme of the Rural Women's Summit kind of centered around the concept of showing rural Democrats to be good neighbors. But that not just being like, letting somebody borrow a cup of sugar. That comes with a little more teeth, actually. And so what that might look like is pointing to, policy like funding our public schools, caring for seniors. Being a good neighbor has to functionally have deliverables and mean something. And Casey's really opened my eyes to something. I've also been a chair of my local Democratic committee, and Casey's done something truly unique in her community that never would have occurred to me, and I think that it should have. So Casey, I'd love to hear, when you first became chair of Appomattox, what is the very unusual thing that you first did with that role?
Yeah, so when I became the chair of the Appomattox Committee, now understand I grew up in the neighboring county, Campbell, so that's where home is, and Appomattox is right next door and essentially the same country. So when I became the chair, I entered the chair position completely green with zero understanding of what it is a chair does. So when I stepped into the role, I asked my committee, would it be possible, and that I had a strong interest in sitting down and talking with the Republican chair. I wanted to get to know them and find out what they were doing in the community and what their thoughts were, and just to get to know them as another chair, since we're competitors and we would be working against and or with each other, I wanted an opportunity to sit down and have a chat with them, coffee, lunch, anything. And my committee laughed at me. So they said that there's no way that will ever happen. And I said, why not? And they said, well, they're the Republican chair, and we're not even sure who that is right now. And they don't have anything to do with us, and we don't have anything to do with them. And I said, well, that's still something I would like to do, just to get to know them, know who they are, know what they look like, and just to have some type of interaction or dialogue with them. So that first year, that did not happen at all. Fast forward to last year, and we had an issue come up with voter intimidation, and the chair of the committee sent out an email to me and said, hey, we have this issue going on, and I know that you would be as interested in dealing with voter intimidation as we are. Would you like to sit down and discuss it and see what we can do to work together? And I said, yes.
I love this so much. Starting from, and again, this was not on my list of tasks to take care of as a rural Democratic Committee chair. I really appreciate you bringing this forward, because I think it's really inspiring. And I know we're having a lot of conversations right now about voter protection and just what it means to have a shared understanding of what the rules are, what the terms of engagement are in living in a democracy, and at a moment where it feels like the social fabric of our communities is shredded in a lot of ways, and really difficult to have this kind of link and connection. And since we don't seem to have that at the highest levels, this is where we find it. This is where we find it in community. This is a perfect example of Casey reaching out to find this connection with someone on the other side, not because they agree on the issues, but this is courageous. It is innovative, and functionally it has already paid off, right? Because this issue was happening around voter intimidation, and at least there was, and Casey pointed this out to me in a conversation, that the purpose of this outreach was to humanize the chair of the Republican committee, for them to see each other. And I think that's what's really powerful about grassroots organizing, period. It is creating these opportunities that Casey has initiated that will never exist at the highest levels. This is us being at the forefront of what needs to happen in our politics. So Casey, I genuinely appreciate that you brought this to the table. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are if other people decide to take this on, because I know you had some thoughts about, different areas and just offering maybe some insights and guidance.
Yes, I think it's an opportunity that everybody should seek out, if possible, create it. But it's not for everybody, and you can't go into it blindly. There are a lot of red areas where there is, it's a blurry gray area between being a Democrat and being a Republican, heavily in our red districts. So a lot of our Democrats look like and act like Republicans in much of our heavy red rural districts. I was telling Lindley earlier that to see a far left, absolute atheist, non-conforming, non-binary, take your pick, take your moniker, acronym, and apply it, Democrat, is a unicorn in our rural districts. The majority of our Democrats look and act just like our Republican counterparts. So they have guns. They are conservative, very conservative Christians. They don't participate in politics in a Democratic way, but more in a Republican way. So getting those votes to swing our way is a lot harder. So when you're reaching across the table and you're reaching out, you have to understand that in counties like this, you may be dealing with somebody that's just trying to get information so that they can use it against you, so that they can abuse it. I'm in a unique position because I'm a Black female living in a red district, chairing a Democratic committee, and it's traditionally a white male here. So being able to step into that position and have that opportunity was an godsend for me. So I was able to say, hey, this is where we have an opportunity to sit down and, one, humanize each other, two, to say, hey, we do have areas where we can agree and we can work together. We had a common purpose, and we were also able to stand behind a common candidate that was nonpartisan. So that opened the door for us to have those conversations and to say, this is where we can find our equal ground. And that's pretty much the only place that we found our common ground. But it was a place where we could stand and actually do something together and bring our community together on something. It was still divided because the particular position they were trying to be voted into is one that has been traditionally held by the same person for the last 30, 40 years. So that alone was a division. So that was also something that we had to sit down and discuss.
Thank you so much for that. And I think, anybody willing to take this similar approach, I think we would just encourage you to be mindful of your local community. They're all very, very different. There's a different vibe. The Republican committees and their operatives are all different. So would just advise folks to use caution in engaging in these conversations. Sadly, there's a reason why we say that politics makes you paranoid. So I encourage people to really look seriously at considering this approach that Casey has taken, but also keeping yourself safe and being mindful of kind of where we are in this moment. But I hope you can all take away a little hopefulness in this, in that we're so concerned about the health of our democracy and that being ripped apart. But we know that even folks who are supportive of the former treasonous president, they are still behind the scenes very deeply uncomfortable with the systemic breaking of the shared rules that we're supposed to have. That is real. And what Casey is doing here is having a conversation with somebody in a position to maintain some level of shared understanding of what the rules are here and to implement those in partnership. So really, really important work, and appreciate everything that you do, Casey.
Casey, I want to add one more thing. Any advice you have for anybody who wants to take the bold step you did?
I say go ahead and take the chance. It doesn't hurt to get to know somebody. You can't meet somebody and think of them as a human if you're not actually talking to them and having just basic discussions. If you can't talk about anything else, try and say, let's discuss the weather. It doesn't hurt. And if they say no, they say no, but it never hurts to at least try and say, hey, where can we find a place where we can agree? If nothing else, voter registration. You can do a voter registration together. That's a nonpartisan thing. It doesn't affect either party, and you get people registered to vote. Easy.
Well, thank you so much, Casey and Lindley, for talking about it and talking about amazing weather. Did we have incredible weather at the Rural Summit or what? It could not have been more gorgeous.
It was perfect.
It was Rural Virginia at its best. And with that, I'm going to invite Louisa to come up for our next segment.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robbin. So I am really excited because we are now going to get a chance to talk to CARRIE Short. And for some of you, you started this journey when Trump was elected, creating a grassroots group in your neighborhood because you could not figure out any other way to address the situation. And Carrie was one of those people, but she has persevered, and particularly in a part of the state in the Hampton Roads area that it's a challenge. It's a challenge for Democrats down there. And so, Carrie, we're really excited to hear about you, what journey you took, and then really, we would love some tips for just how to be a badass and how to continue to be a badass as we've been trying to do for the last 5 years. So over to you, Carrie.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here. Long-time caller, first-time participant. Is that what I'm supposed to say? Because I've always enjoyed these power lunches on Fridays. They're great. So I want to just echo one thing that Casey said and about courage, because I think one of the things that I was thinking about talking about in terms of how to be a badass and tips on being the badass is that you are sticking your neck out a lot. And I think that I think that one of the things that I would say is that being willing to stick your neck out comes with the acknowledgement that your head might get cut off, right? It happens. And so I think surrounding yourself with people who support you so that when that happens, you have the support that you need to sort of brush your butt off and get right back in there. So I joined Motherboard right at its very beginning. And Motherboard, as you mentioned, is a grassroots organization to elect and connect progressives in Hampton Roads. Virginia Beach was very red at the time. Hard to remember that. It's kind of considered purple now. But at the very beginning, when we were doing canvassing, most of the Motherboard outreach was done in Virginia Beach, trying very hard to flip delegate districts in Virginia Beach and to get and to beat Scott Taylor and get Elaine elected. Right. So we started out going to neighborhoods where people would literally look out the door and say, I am the only Democrat on my block. And I would show them the visit sheet. You know, I'd show them how fat it was, my packet, and said, these are all Democrats I'm visiting today in your neighborhood, you know, to encourage them and let them know that you're not the only Democrat on your block. There are plenty, and we're out here. And we were very successful in flipping Virginia Beach. And so, so much of our efforts were in Virginia Beach. And then I moved on to start working on some Norfolk local issues that were super important to us under the leadership of Jackie Glass. I was on the No Casino campaign, where we tried to keep a casino out of Norfolk. And then helped Delegate Glass, now Delegate Glass, with her special election. So, so I'm happy to be back in my activist home in Norfolk. And so that's kind of the journey, and I'm continuing to help Delegate Glass now as a communication assistant and helping her. So I guess also just excited about sort of being the badass, right, and sticking your neck out. I was kind of thinking about what inspired me. I think that part of the success of Motherboard, especially in the early days, is that we had a real dedicated group of people on the executive board who all took roles, really specific roles. We had a really talented communicator on our executive committee, and she would sort of monitor our tone so that we all had the same tone. And I think that in doing grassroots groups, and trying to run a group, and you want to be responsive, you want to be out on the socials, you want to have your presence, you have to stay in the algorithm, right? Or you'll get bumped right out, right? Yep. And so it puts this pressure on you that you feel like you have to reply to everything. You have to be on all the time. You're sitting at dinner, like sneaking your phone under the table so your family doesn't see that you're on the, you know, trying to do your socials again, right? Okay. So what we end up doing was taking turns, and it's been successful at my church. It's been successful in another group, and now it's very successful in Delegate Glass's office. So I would really highly recommend that you find your people, you get on board together, you understand what your tone, what your message is going to be, and then you help each other out and take turns. And so in Delegate Glass's office, for example, we have a communications team, and we take turns being on duty for socials. So you're not driving yourself crazy. Back in the day, you know, when I was on Motherboard exec, we'd call it keeping the mother in Motherboard, when one of us would have to kind of check out to do the mom stuff. Yeah. You know, it's something that we all understood. So I think finding your tribe that will support you in your badassness is really important. And again, as I mentioned, finding the badasses that will support you when your head gets cut off, because if you stick your neck out more than the average Joe, you're going to get your head cut off more than the average Joe. And I think that I started off like in the No Casino campaign, kind of thin skinned. It was the first time I was really out there not supporting a candidate. You know,
Yep.
we were the message. We were doing that together. And it was, you really, really scary at the time. It took a lot of courage for that. So
these are great tips. And I think you're so right about the importance of having a team around you, because most of us are doing this in our volunteer capacities, right? And it's really hard to keep it up. It's also when there are, with times when we aren't winning, it's nice to have other people around to commiserate, to vent, to whatever. And then when we win, it's also nice to be able to celebrate with folks. And so doing the work, it's good to have a team. And then doing the celebration, it's good to have a team.
Right.
So wondering, tell us a little bit more about what's happening in the elections this year in the Virginia Beach and Hampton Roads area. We know.
I don't know. Like I know other districts got redistricted. Does anyone feel completely hosed right now? Or are we the only ones down here? I mean, what? Okay, so if you really want to know what's going on down here, Elaine's district just became more rural and Bobby Scott's district just became more urban. So we're introducing people to Bobby Scott that live in areas. He's deeper into Chesapeake. He still has Portsmouth. He still has parts of Norfolk. Elaine has no more Norfolk. She's virtually out of Norfolk. So she's having to make some headway in areas like Franklin and Suffolk and Northampton County. So not only is she covering the Eastern Shore, which is very rural, now she's covering that southwest part of our region, which is also very rural. She's got a lot of ground to cover. So we really need help, helping to introduce Elaine to a bunch of new people. Again, her, when she beat Scott Taylor, we were dealing with a lot of rural voters who knew him. He was from the Eastern Shore. And he carried a lot of weight with them. So having to introduce her to those people is a big challenge for us. I have never canvassed in a rural area. So rural ground game, we need some tips and we need some help, because I'm not, I'm usually going door to door in a little apartment building in Virginia Beach or downtown Norfolk. So in terms of Bobby Scott, so just covering the congressional races right now, he doesn't really have any new localities, but he has picked up some more down in Chesapeake. Chesapeake's an interesting area, also historically red, but it's building. So there may be some inroads for us in Chesapeake. I'm not really sure how that's going to shake out. Of course, looking at the House of Delegates districts, I understand that's for, next year. We're going to be looking, thank God that case went through, so we're not running. I don't know where everyone stands on that, but the idea of running a campaign this fall for the House of Delegates, and I'm so glad we're not doing that. So we could potentially in 93, which is near and dear to my heart, because that's Delegate Glass, where Delegate Glass intends to run. Right now, she's the only declared in that area. We don't know, but we could have an incumbent versus incumbent situation in House District 93. And then 95 has no incumbent, 96 has no incumbent. And then looking at 94, also open, that has no incumbent. So it's going to be really interesting. 94 picked up a lot of what was Elaine's, like kind of over on like in the Willoughby, Granby corridor, for those of you that know Norfolk, that area. So 94 is going to be interesting. 98 has potentially 2 Republican incumbents. That's out in South Virginia Beach. Barry Knight, aka Pig Farmer, very powerful in our House of Delegates, obviously. And so we could potentially have 2 Republicans running in that district. So that's very interesting. And of course, the Senate, getting excited. Some people are starting to declare, but there are incumbents running against each other too. So DeSteph is so powerful, potentially running against Linwood Lewis or possibly another person who's primarying him. So Then we've got 2 incumbents in Senate District 18 with Luis Lucas and Lionel Sproul. Lionel Sproul has outraised Luis Lucas so far. I don't know if you guys have been following that in VPAP. He's outraised her. And then Cheryl Turpin, many of you remembered her from House of Delegates, has declared she's running in Senate District 22 out in Virginia Beach. So against a very popular, very charismatic former NFL football player, Aaron Rouse, who's done a great job on city council and is going to run against Cheryl. So we're facing a big shakeup. It's a little bit might be inside baseball, but I'm trying to learn this. We're all like trying to learn how this works. When we have potential incumbents running against each other. We certainly, our grassroots group hasn't seen it because it only happens every 10 years that we get redistricted. So we're all new at this. And so how can you help, I guess? I know that the Network Nova people love to come down and canvass down in Hampton Roads. I don't know what it is about us. It is really hard to get people from Hampton Roads canvassing. Yeah, I don't understand it. But we have a bad rep. Apparently we have a bad rep for canvassing down here. So definitely those busloads of Northern Virginia folks coming to canvass always gets us energized. It's a great way for more Hampton Roads people to show up to canvass when you all start showing up. And of course, we've really enjoyed the support many of you have given to local candidates. I know some of you postcarded for Jackie when she ran. So you know, we're always really happy to get your support from down here and show us how it works.
Well, Carrie, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you covering what's happening in the House and Senate for next year, because what's happening in Virginia Beach, we're seeing a lot of that everywhere. So it's going to be insane next year. And hopefully we're going to be able to, through our coalitions and through the Power Lunch, you know, to find ways to, as you said, learn about the candidates. And we are lucky as grassroots that we can weigh in on primaries. And I think groups are going to have to make those decisions, because local Democratic committees, you know, maybe do it behind the scenes, but they're not going to do it out front. And if there are really good candidates that we don't want to lose, we are going to have to step up. And I think we're actually going to need to be more busy during the primary season, because once it all gets, you know, settled down and we know who the Democratic candidates are, then it's pretty clear which are going to be the hard seats to hold and the ones that are, you know, but I think the primary is going to be critical.
I think it's really hard for grassroots groups because I know Motherboard's history, they didn't weigh in on primaries. They would wait until after the candidate was declared, because, you know, at the grassroots level, you're going to have people who are on both sides. If there's two, you know, there are going to be lots of different people. So again, you know, one of the other things I just wanted to mention quickly about grassroots organizing is that I sometimes made the mistake. So I'm coming from a nonprofit community service background. All of my stuff's been social, right? But so when I got into the political side, I kind of thought, well, we're starting this coalition, we're all on the same page, right? We're all on the same base. But I would never have started a community service coalition, right? Of nonprofits and community activist groups, you know, for social activism. I would have never just assumed we were all in the same place, right? I don't know why I thought this, but our tent is huge, right? So I don't know why I kind of thought, well, we're all starting from the same place. And I skipped some steps in trust building. I skipped some steps that I would always have to do in a different environment, because I thought we were kind of all coming from the same place. We are too diverse for that. We cannot skip steps. So those coalitions are really, it's hard to build trust in those coalitions, and you can never skip a step. I think that was my big thing that I learned in trying to develop these coalitions down
I think
here.
That's so important. And I know we're going to move to talking about the Women's Summit, but in terms of trust, I think not only do you need to build it, but then you have to maintain it. And I think we had a challenge with COVID where we weren't getting together in person. And now we have that opportunity to start to rebuild those relationships, rebuild that trust. And part of that is going and doing stuff in person like the Women's Summit. So I'm going to see if Stair wants to come on and join us so we can talk a little bit about the third Women's Summit, which will be in Virginia Beach the weekend of September 16, 17, and 18. And I see Stair getting all prepared for this conversation. So Carrie, why don't you give us some background on just what you're thinking about in terms of the Women's Summit, and then we'll turn it over to Stair to give us the logistics.
Right. We are so excited to have Network Nova come down because they always get us so fired up. So we have planned, I've joined in on mostly handling the logistics, but we have planned a whole weekend of activities. So I hope that everyone on the call really understands that this is a whole weekend of activities. We're starting out Friday night with a big social together on the ocean front down in Virginia Beach. It's going to be super fun social. I'm going to let Stair tell you all the logistics about it. But then on Saturday morning early, we're meeting at the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art, also very close to the ocean front, where we're going to have really intense program with speakers, possibly a panel, getting that together. We're going to be there until about noon. And then all afternoon is an afternoon of action. We have so many things. We're going to be joining a large canvas, which Sarah will tell you about. We have postcard writing opportunities. We have voter registration. Motherboard is going to be hosting some voter registration activities. We are also have secured a private tour of the Brock Environmental Center, which is where the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is. It is a LEED certified building on the inlet, on the Lynnhaven River. It is gorgeous. It is something to see. They will really help us understand some of the local issues of the environment in Virginia Beach and with Chesapeake Bay. They're doing outstanding work out there. I'm excited. We also have a brand new arts district in Virginia Beach called the Vibe District. They are just having a mural festival out there. This was something that citizens of Virginia Beach wanted and fought for, and they got it. So it itself is something that, if you see it, you get inspired because you know that citizens put this thing together. So that is just in the afternoon. And then that evening, we're all getting together at Smart Mouth where we're hoping to get some candidates. Now, I will say, this is a conversation for another time. School board is so important in Virginia Beach right now. Everyone understands school board elections. All of a sudden, they have taken on new importance. So I have a feeling there will be some school board candidates coming Saturday night. But anyone that we know has declared running, they're all being invited for Saturday night. So you can rub elbows along with some activists that will be there. And then I understand some activities are, and then Smart Mouth will probably last till 8:30 or 9. And then I understand we've got some more action activities for Sunday. So this is going to be a whole weekend of fun. And I'm so proud to help host this. So glad y'all are coming down to Southeast Virginia to do this. We really need to get inspired and motivated. And I think Network Nova is just the group to do it.
Awesome. So over to you, Stair. Tell us a little bit more. What do we need to know to get involved and to make sure we're there?
Well, first of all, I'd really like to thank CARRIE because you have been so instrumental in getting this put together. And also, thank you so much for your rundown. I went to the Virginia Beach Dem meeting last night and we started to get a little handle on what's going on, but you gave us a really good picture of that. And I do want to make a shout out to candidates. We are calling all candidates for Saturday night. That's going to be at the Smart Mouth Brewing Pilot House. And that's where we want to see you. In terms of any other details, we're going to have, our always popular social on Friday night. And as CARRIE said, the Museum of Contemporary Art is going to host our All In to Win Festival. And it's really exciting that we're working with so many different groups. The Virginia Grassroots Coalition, the Loudon Coalition, the Moms Demand Action are coming down for a big weekend. National Organization for Women has committed to canvas. National Women's Political Caucus, Clean Virginia, Rural Ground Game, and hopefully many, many more. We'll be having a meeting next week on Tuesday, 5:30, if you want to join to get pumped up and help people get organized to come.
That's awesome. And I will note, Stair, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you wanted one of those vote early yard signs, Stair, bring it down to you during the Women's Summit. So if you want a yard sign and you just, you don't want to buy a whole bulk of them and have them shipped to you, Stair will bring some down with her. So let her know and fill out that form that we had in the chat earlier.
Good. Thank you for that reminder. This is very important.
Of course. But this is really exciting. Over to you, Robbin.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the show. Can you believe it? It's already almost 1 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. And just to remind people, that this is the Friday Power Lunch, and you can sponsor us by becoming a patron. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And we want to thank all the people who helped put this on. First, I want to thank our co-hosts today, Louisa and Lindley, who stepped up today. Of course, Stair, Calhoun, our ambassador of Buzz. We're missing today Katherine White and Fennell Norton, who we always miss. Heidi Dragneff, who's our social media diva. Our Zoom crew helper, Laura Martinez. Our chat liaison, Michelle McKinney. And our content concierge, Julie Galdo, Shally Reinhardt, and Alvina Mikhail. And that is our show for today. We have the after chat coming on at 1 o'clock. And before that, I'm going to run credits and get ready, because we'll be talking more about what we need to do in Virginia Beach, how we can work together in rural Virginia, and most importantly, how we are all in to win in Virginia.